Shana Tova, everyone. Of course, October 7th, for all of us, didn't just mark a day of tragedy. In many ways, it changed us. And of course, this past year has in so many ways reshaped who we are. Hanan Ben-Ari, one of Israel's most iconic musicians, wrote in one of his hit songs, "I'm no longer who I was, who you knew." I think many of us can agree that we're not who we were this time last year. Since last Rosh Hashanah, how many tears have we shed? How much anxiety and fear has become part of our daily reality? Everything we may have believed about the world has been shattered. You may remember the survey that I sent in June. How have the events of October 7th reshaped your Jewish identity and your relationship with Israel? Your insights helped shape this sermon. And if you were not able to respond, we have put a new link on our website for you to do so. We'd like to know how you're feeling. I'd like to know. Now, I didn't realize just how much I changed until I went to Israel this past summer. I went to officiate at the wedding of Jeff and Susie Reisner's wonderful daughter, Kayla, and then to take some of our members on a Beth Yeshurun solidarity mission. How am I now different? How have I changed? To begin, I want to share a story that was passed down among the Jewish exiles of the Spanish Inquisition, a tale over 500 years old. According to the story, a terrible plague has broken out on a ship carrying Jewish refugees from Spain during the Inquisition. The captain responds by forcing the Jewish exiles ashore in a desolate area. Unfortunately, many of them die of starvation. And while the remaining few begin walking in search of food, water, any place to survive, among them was a Jewish man with his wife and 2 sons. First, his wife passes away, then he and his 2 sons faint. And when the man wakes up, he tragically finds that his 2 sons have died. Overwhelmed with grief, this Jewish man rises and cries out, "Lord of the universe, although you are doing much to make me abandon my religion, know for certain that nothing will remain, nothing will change my determination to remain a Jew." And he concludes, "A Jew I am, and a Jew will I remain." Now, why did this Jewish man, after enduring such agony, fleeing his home, losing his wife, his 2 sons, having to start over, why did he choose to continue on as a Jew? We could not blame him if he had decided to leave his religious faith. But here again, we meet the great mystery of Jewish continuity, a question that has been asked for thousands of years throughout history after everything, the pogroms and persecutions, the expulsions and massacres. How are we still here? In 1898, Mark Twain posed the question. Twain asked, "All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?" This summer, I found an answer in Israel. We've always survived because we refuse to give it all up. Instead, we find a way to overcome anything and anyone to remain Jewish. Like the man in the story, to be a Jew is to survive, and there is no survival if not as a Jew. It's something primal, deeply ingrained in all of us. It comes not from any reason, but straight from our innermost instincts. It's in our DNA. No matter the circumstances, a Jew I am, and a Jew will I remain. On our trip, I saw again that Zionism is just the latest version of this remarkable Jewish will to survive against all costs. We Jews will not go away. I recently came across a statement made by Ismail Haniyeh, the former head of Hamas. And during a period of ongoing suicide bombings in 2002, he stated that Hamas had finally gained the upper hand over Israelis because Hamas had discovered their weak spot. He said, "It's that Jews love life more than any other people. They prefer not to die." Now, I hate to use the words of a terrorist leader ever, especially on this day, but he was right. No matter what our enemies may do, we do love life, and we will do what it takes to live. But what I saw this summer is that Zionism is not just the latest manifestation of our eternal will to live. It's our people's greatest ever success story, succeeding beyond the dreams of Herzl for two reasons. One, Zionism was never about having a victim mentality. It was never about grievances or blame. Rather, it's about taking the initiative to better the Jewish people's destiny. Zionism arrived to declare to the world, we Jews will no longer be powerless, subject to the unpredictable whims of the majority. No more. Now we finally have a say. Now, anyone who has been to Israel knows that you get the most accurate information not from writers or from academic scholars, but from taxi drivers. So in Tel Aviv one afternoon, I wasn't afraid at all. It won't be easy, but he told me as long as we have Israel, the Jewish people will be okay, because the power of our survival is finally in our hands. He was right. We finally have a say. And two, Zionism has done more for our people than any other movement in our remarkable history, because it had something that no other movement in our history had: the continuity of the Jewish people in our historic homeland. As the old story goes, once the Israeli ambassador at the United Nations began, "Ladies and gentlemen, before I commence my speech, I want to relay an old story about Moses. When Moses struck the rock and brought it forth water, Moses thought, what a good opportunity to have a bath. So he removed his clothes and he entered the water, but when Moses got out and wanted to dress, his clothes had vanished. Moses yelled out, 'A Palestinian had stolen my clothes.' The UN Palestinian representative jumps up furiously and shouts, 'What are you talking about? The Palestinians weren't around then.' The Israeli representative smiles and says, 'And now that we have made that clear, I will begin my speech.'" I don't think it's a true story, but it sounds really good. No, Zionists were not sent to Israel on behalf of another nation to colonize the land. We were simply returning home. And yet here's the remarkable thing. Through it all, always willing to compromise, to split the land for the sake of peace, agreeing again and again to a Palestinian homeland. But as we've seen too often, like we did again on October 7th, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is really not about land. If it were, the Arab world would have accepted the United Nations partition plan of 1947, or the Palestinians would have agreed to the numerous offers, generous offers, for a state of their own. But unfortunately, the conflict is really about too many who refuse to accept any presence of a Jewish state in the Middle East. So Zionists will have to continue to fight for their survival with an understanding of their very special place in Jewish history. Now our enemies here and in Europe, and of course in the Middle East, have taken the word Zionism and distorted it. For years, anti-Israel protesters have worked to turn the word Zionism into a derogatory term. It's equated with racism and genocide. We have so much work to do. to reclaim that precious and beautiful word, Zionism. Because despite what the anti-Semites might yell behind their masks, Zionism is only about the eternal Jewish will to survive in our historic homeland. Nothing more and nothing less. That is why if a Zionist is threatened or attacked, he or she will do whatever is necessary to defend themselves. A Zionist knows they have no choice. They can't sit back and do nothing, cannot give up, because if they do, their very existence will be at risk. And a Zionist does not ever apologize for simply wanting to live. And it's not easy. There's never any time for a Zionist to rest. Israel's enemies, with supporters and sympathizers throughout the world, they actually believe that with enough struggle and with enough violence, their dream of from the river to the sea will soon come true. Do you know what one of the newest and most popular anti-Israel groups in America is called? It's named Within Our Lifetime. They're working to realize their dream and their desire of destroying the Jewish state within our lifetime. But as Golda Meir once said, we Jews have a secret weapon in our struggle. We have no place else to go because we are finally at home. And today, as Jews worldwide, as we do here in Houston, celebrate Rosh Hashanah, our Jewish home fights for its survival in Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, with rockets raining down on its cities, against enemies on 7 fronts, all funded and directed by Iran. No other nation on earth, no other nation, faces the same challenges. But Israelis are not, as Menachem Begin once said, the Jews with trembling knees. They are a nation of lions. And he was right. As we've seen over the last several months, and especially over the last few weeks, Israelis are a nation of lions. They are not Jews with trembling knees. And I saw it this summer, more than ever. First, there was our bus driver, Avi. He's the guy on the left. And Avi inspired me not just because he was the worst bus driver I ever had. And that's saying a lot because you know Israeli bus drivers. But he really inspired me because within days of October 7th, Avi joined 650 other men in their 50s and 60s to form a new armored tank battalion called the Phoenix Unit. Now, these older men didn't have to fight at all. But like the mythological phoenix, the spirit of these older Israelis reflected the essence of resilience and rebirth. Despite their age, these older men displayed remarkable courage fighting against Hamas in Gaza. And their bravery underscored their unwavering commitment to their homeland. Now, if America's security was dependent on 52-year-old guys like me, we'd be in big trouble. But not in Israel. They have Zionists, men and women, young and old, ready to do whatever it takes. Like in my second example. One night, our group met with members of Brothers for Life, an incredible organization which helps injured Israeli soldiers. It's the Israeli equivalent of America's Wounded Warrior Project. And as you can imagine, the needs have never been greater. We met Yosef. He's in the front left of this picture. Yosef is almost 40, and he was injured 10 years ago in another war with Hamas in Gaza, an injury that caused severe nerve damage to his left arm. And yet last year, after October, against the objections of his commanders, he fought and he fought to rejoin his reserve unit. And he finally succeeded. and he fought for 3 months. And when we met with him in June, he was preparing to go back into Gaza. And did I mention that he has a successful high-tech job, is married, and has 3 young children? So we asked him, had he not done enough? He answered by saying he had no choice. Despite his circumstances, he still felt obligated to do what he could to protect the people of Israel. And he said he couldn't look his children in the eyes without knowing he had done all he could to protect them. In Israel, so many fight for the privilege of serving in the IDF. They know their families depend on it. That is being a Zionist. A third example, the hardest day of our trip was when we traveled south to visit the places attacked last October. And at the site of the Nova Festival massacre, we met a father whose son was killed. His son's name was Ben Shmoni. And here, his father, on the right side of this picture, was there meeting with groups all day with one request: to share his son's story with others. And here's his son. I think he looks like an angel, and it's no coincidence. His son, Ben, initially made it to safety, fleeing from the unfolding Hamas massacre with 4 strangers in his car. He made it all the way to Beersheba, 30 minutes away, and despite their begs, their pleas to stay, he headed back to try to save more people. And he saved another group of 5 people. And then, after bringing them to Beersheba, he headed back to rescue more. A third rescue attempt when he didn't need to make any at all. And on that third effort, after his vehicle came under heavy gunfire, he was tragically killed. He saved 9 people and died trying to save 3 more. A popular Israeli band released a song about him. And the last line goes, "Who is the person who goes back into hell a moment after he escaped?" He went back in because he shared a unique bond with everyone at that festival. Let me explain. Because maybe this special bond explains why, according to the United Nations, Israel is the 5th happiest country in the world. Now, because it's a UN report, Israel is probably the happiest country in the world. Now, with all of their challenges, how could Israelis be so happy? Because everyone feels part of a greater purpose than themselves. So there is great meaning to everyday lives, the number one key to happiness. And there exists among Israelis a deep, almost tribal sense of sticking together. And this summer, I experienced it firsthand. And if we are Zionists, even here in America, we can feel part of this greater purpose. And perhaps that sense of greater meaning is why Israel leads the Western world in having children. Now, it's not because of the ultra-Orthodox. It's not because of our friends in the ultra-Orthodox world. It's because secular Israeli families are having more children than comparable families all over the world. Everywhere I went, there are crying babies. But you don't get upset when a baby starts crying in a restaurant. You smile. It's Zionism in action. Now, my last example. Here is something else remarkable that we experienced this summer. Despite the never-ending terrorism and wars, I saw that most Israelis still don't hate Arabs. They still yearn for peace with those who are not aligned with terrorist groups. And perhaps this is best demonstrated by my heroes, and I think many of you as well, Rachel Goldberg and John Poland. Since last October, they worked every single day to free their son Hirsch, and they became some of the most visible advocates for the hostages. And may their son Hirsch and all the victims' memories be for a blessing. Despite their own pain and grief, through it all, they urged compassion both for the hostages and for the innocent civilians in Gaza, asking all of us, do we aspire to be human, or are we swept up in the enticing and delicious world of hate? And they reminded us, as they said often, all of us, that hatred is not actually helpful, nor is it constructive. In a competition of pain, there's never a winner. And we met with other family members of hostages. I expected to be angry. And they were upset. They were scared. They were full of anxiety. But there wasn't cause for violence. There was hope. Hope that one day their family members would be freed and that peace, God willing, was one day still possible. Because they told me no matter what the other side does, Zionism and a Zionist will continue to work for peace through strength. Yes, defeating the terrorists and the extremists. And unfortunately, there are too many in the Arab world today. But we won't defeat them through animosity for all of those on the other side. Because as I saw again and again this summer, a Zionist can acknowledge the pain of all the victims, can still hold on to the prayer that one day innocent Palestinians can also have security and prosperity. That's the Jewish way to respond. As we read this morning in our Torah, first we read about Jewish self-defense when Sarah protected her family. It's our number one priority, to do whatever we need to defend Jewish lives. But then in our Torah portion, we read about empathy for Hagar and her son Ishmael. Because our Jewish tradition often teaches we don't have to choose between vigilance for Jewish self-defense and compassion for the innocence of our enemies. As John and Rachel reminded me, as so many family members of the hostages, we Jews and Israelis can have both. Empathy and Jewish self-defense are both a vital part of our tradition. And here's what I love. Israel walks the line between security and morality and does it better than any country in the world. Don't let the anti-Zionists tell you any different. They do more than any other army would ever do to protect the innocence of its enemies. And I believe we can stand very tall as proud Zionists. And that's important. Because I wish I could tell you that this new year will be easier, that this will end soon, and it will continue to go on, of course, in Israel and even here in America. Now, thank God most Americans still understand the truth and they support Israel. But too many protest and work against the Jewish state, especially on college campuses, even some fellow Jews. And yet, a Zionist never writes off a fellow Jew. A Zionist understands that today, some young people are influenced by false stories on social media and anti-Semitic beliefs on their college campuses, making it easy for some of our young to fall in the crowd of virtue signaling for the latest progressive cause. And despite this, a Zionist continues to try to educate them so that one day, God willing, they will see the truth. So we welcome their questions. We welcome their challenges with confidence because we have nothing to hide. A Zionist knows the history. And a Zionist doesn't love Israel because she's perfect, nor do they need her to be perfect to love her. Criticism is, of course, possible. No country is perfect. But Israel is a righteous country. And criticism is, of course, possible because a Zionist love always speaks louder. Or as the late Israeli Rabbi David Hartman would say to diaspora Jews, by all means criticize us, but criticize us like a mother and not like a mother-in-law. My friends, yes, over 125 years ago, even Mark Twain did ask, all things are mortal but the Jew, all other forces pass, he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? This summer, I saw the answer to this age-old question unfold before my eyes, one that gave me the hope I needed to overcome the trauma we all felt on October 7th. And two, convinced me to do even more this year to reclaim that precious word of Zionism. What can you do? I encourage you to also become even more of a Zionist, never hesitating to speak up, standing firm for what is true and just, with as many friends, neighbors, colleagues, religious leaders, journalists, elected leaders as possible. Don't stop. Every day, there is something you and I can do every single day, because we Jews must continue to overcome every obstacle to preserve our faith and ensure our survival. Best summarized in this sign I saw on my last day at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. It read, "Our wounds are centuries old, but so are our resilience and our strength." Our wounds are centuries old, but so are our resilience and our strength. How blessed we are, thinking everything our ancestors went through, to have this country, to have Israel, to live in the age of Zionism, the greatest answer to how we Jews will always be here. So over this new year, I will do even more to help Zionism flourish. Will you, all of you, young and old, will you join me? Shana Tova.